Our audience is waiting for our panel, and I'm looking forward to it because with a name like this, the truth about ads, is it a disruption, a requirement, or an opportunity for game marketers? We are ready to roll, and we have you, of course, David, and we have Jacki Vause, who's back, our mother of dragons. I'm enjoying this incredibly. I think I'll let you introduce your panel as well. And I think we just hand it over to you, Jacki, because the topic says it all, and you've got the experts for it. And we've got Oscar, who asked a question as well. Very interactive, indeed, indeed. I'll leave it to you.
Thanks, Peggy Ann. Lovely to see you again. Hi, guys. Lovely to see everybody here. We're sort of rounding off the day. What a day it's been. Full of content and so many interesting presentations, crossing the whole world of advertising and PR and monetization, and many discussions and many great presentations. There's a lot to take in. And luckily now we have all of your great expertise to share with our audience. So what I'm going to do is I'll just quickly introduce myself, and then I'll introduce you all, and then we'll kick off with hopefully a lively debate. So my name is Jacki Vause, as Peggy Ann said. I run a marketing and PR company called Dimoso, and I will then pass the baton over to David, who's just finished his presentation on TikTok.
Yeah, so for the people that weren't here before, hey, I'm David. I've been an online marketing manager for Bytro for the last 2.5 years, managing all sorts of platforms and networks, with highlights would be Facebook and TikTok.
Great, thank you, David. And Pooja.
Hi, my name is Pooja. I've been in the digital marketing space for about 10 years now. The last 4.5 at Tenjin and at Google before that. At Tenjin, I head up the growth and success for our North America and Australia customers.
Fantastic, thank you, Pooja. And the inimitable Oscar Clark.
Yeah, so I'm here because I'm old. I co-founder of Fundamentally Games. We're a living games publisher, but I've been involved in kind of thinking about ads and monetization forever. Literally, like I was at BT when we were still trying to work out what a banner ad size would be. It wasn't always fixed, and obviously we don't do those banner things anymore. Horrible things. Anyway, I was also the initial evangelist at Unity Ads. So I've been working basically at the forefront of all this stuff, and working at games as a service ever since, and literally wrote the book on the subject. So there's not a topic about this I haven't had some thoughts on. So anyway.
And Diego, lovely to see you again. Hi, Diego.
Lovely to see. Hello, everyone. I'm Diego. I'm a game designer by 13 years, more or less now. Work in AAA, mobile, indie, and AA, and I'm very passionate about monetization. Something that I experiment a lot, and I always try to push the boundaries on it. So a panel about it, it's just fantastic.
And Diego won't toot his own trumpet, so to speak, but he's recently published a book.
Well, no, he's writing, sadly. It's not...
You've got a publishing deal.
Publishing 8 pages so far. I'm still far behind.
Which is a game designer's toolkit, I understand. So
yes.
That'll be great. So we have 2 authors here, which is fabulous. And last but certainly not least, a man who's been around in this industry for almost as long as me and Oscar, is Christian Atack.
Well, thank you very much. Well, as you say, I've spent the last 2 decades specializing in mobile game application, distribution, monetization, and regulatory compliance. And that's when I first met Oscar when I was retailing the famous Crazy Frog.
Crazy Frog,
the great good old days. And like you say, back in the banner advertising on Portal. I've lived and worked primarily in EMEA for several world-leading organizations, delivering millions of dollars in advertising revenue. I've most recently branched out into the Asian markets, taking mobile game developers into the China regions. I've forged several multi-million-dollar partnerships with the leading platforms, system integrators, and evangelizing on the best toolkits available to either acquire new users, but ultimately focus on generating as much money as possible for my customers and partners. I'm delighted to join Pocket Gamer in this distinguished panel today, and I hope that I can share some of my learnings from the last 20 years in my mobile journey.
Fantastic. How do I follow that? So the best thing I can do is take the question out to the panel. I mean, we're talking about a big subject here. The truth about ads. Is it a disruption, a requirement, or an opportunity for game makers? So I think because it's such a vast subject, why don't we start at the beginning and what people should really think about right at the beginning of their games development. First thing is, what type of advertising? Is advertising actually a choice that people should be making very early on? And I'm going to start with Oscar here from Fundamentally Games to just kick us off on that question. Where to start?
Where to start? I mean, it's a good question. So I'm going to start by thinking about two things. So the things are basically, do you want anyone to know you exist? And the other one is, do you want to help people understand why your things are valuable? What I mean by that is, I think that we've seen the amazing power of a direct response ad. That's what we're talking about for the most part. Traditional marketing, whilst it has its value, and PR is one of the key factors I would absolutely suggest people think about. In mobile in particular, and wider, the direct connection between a player who's on their phone already, they click on an ad, whether they're in a game or on their Facebook, and then next thing they have the game installed, is a miracle. It's a magic trick. It's reduced friction from basically being a potluck to you now know you're going to get someone installing a game. Now, there are some new rules and so on and so forth. We'll get into, ATT and IDFA, I'm sure all that lovely terminology later. But essentially, magic trick. Someone can see your game and install it. That's the most important thing. The second half of that, the other part of that, is that we need to think about how do we look at ads as part of an exchange mechanism. It's not just about we're going to stop players from playing. It can be done in a smart way where you show them or offer them an ad view which costs them no money, but they know that they're going to be generating new revenue by the fact that you're seeing their ad, and that gives value. So I'm a massive fan of rewarded ads. And I'm not going to go into too much more detail, but for me, it's a case of how do you think about ads? What does it do to you? Why is it important to your business as a game producer? And essentially, how do you stop it from just annoying players?
Brilliant. And I'm going to quickly step over to Diego, because obviously in the design of your games, that should be almost a fundamental choice, really, shouldn't it?
It is. I really want to continue what Oscar was saying. You should think about ad from the start. First of all, because there are so many types of ad that you can choose and you can add and you can implement in your game, and choosing the right one is completely different. But especially, and I want to really focus on that part, especially on this concept of exchange. An ad is not a block. Okay, if you're designing, saying, okay, I'm gonna have an experience and I'm just gonna arbitrarily stop the experience and say, you know what, watch these things, give me basically revenue, or I'll give you some reward. That's not good. That doesn't work. That's annoy the player, as Oscar was saying, but especially that doesn't work. There are so much possibility in which you can reward the player, you can engage the player, you can ask the player to choose between ads, you can literally customize the ad experience to the player that you know you're going to have, or of course with metrics that you will discover that you have the more people plays your game and collect data. And that can make an experience that is way better for everyone. And to be honest, that's something that happened in other media too. At the start, the TV didn't have ad. Now he had a certain type of ads. Then he had certain type of things evolves. And I think that at the moment we are still in this concept of, yeah, I'm just gonna stop your experience and please give me money, which doesn't work. Instead of, I have an experience and I will think this experience with ads in mind. With for example, if I give a very super example that I saw in the football game recently, in which basically they had the banner outside what's called say the soccer field, the football field, which is different from region to region. So they are applied digitally. So the space is there, but applied digitally. That is the type of things. We created the space. We know that we have the soccer field. We know there is a space in it. And now we create customized ads which are not intrusive, don't stop the experience. And that is the type of things that designer needs to think, especially because without monetization, you're not going to go anywhere. It's just something that's there.
What we're talking about advertising actually in games, but then there's the advertising that we do outside of the games, as and David was just talking about his experiences with TikTok. And so it's kind of like as games developers, we have to not only think about putting advertising in our games, but we also have to think about how we advertise our own games. And that's when it really does become a requirement.
Exactly. So when we talk about ad monetization, we obviously think that, okay, this is a way that developers can monetize their players, right? Their non-players. So that would be a win for a developer. We also would think, okay, this can also be interesting because users can enjoy this game for free, right? The developers can monetize these non-payers, and users can enjoy a game and have like a hobby or something related to that without paying. That is awesome. But advertising is also super useful for people that want to grow their own games, because advertisers can acquire new users advertising via other games. So I think ad monetization can be and should be a win for these three pillars of the industry. It is a win, or can be a win for developers. It can be a win for users. And again, it can be a win for UA managers like me that have to acquire new users for my own games.
Well, let's look at it as the win for users, for the players, because we've talked about it not being just a block, that it starts to become something that's more of an integral part of their sort of gaming experience. And Christian, you've probably seen a lot of this over time in terms of the different types of advertising and different ways of monetizing for players, from a player's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Oscar really presented very well about the whole magic of being able to see an advert and actually click on it and download it. And we look at that as whether that's a disruption. And I saved a part of this presentation to discuss that, but I'll answer your question first. And it resonated with one of the talks really early on today, with actually one of the sponsors today, when he was interviewing my good friend Jacki from Rovio, and these guys, along with many other game developers, are really wanting to cross the bridge between the disruption of the user, the in-game play, and ultimately the monetization part. And I think that with the creative tool sets that are out there from many of the leading platform providers, that game developers can actually utilize a lot of these tools to immerse within the actual gameplay an advert that isn't disruptive, and ultimately rewards each of those three candidates that are in those three pillars to allow gamers to play and ultimately to generate revenue. And I think that with continued development, we're going to see some really, really interesting formats. Oscar, mentioned there about the banners. I've seen some remarkable developments within banners and repositioning, and ultimately along that game designer journey, it's about when and where or what particular format suits that particular game. And there is some really great formats available out there.
And from also we have to look at it from a measurement perspective, Pooja. This is your bag. This is your great area of expertise. How do the developers sort of really look at how effective they're being as well with each of these approaches?
So to address the question directly, I think advertisement ads are becoming a necessity just because of all the competition that's out there. Every day there's a new game that's being released. So to get any kind of retention or like user base or revenue, you absolutely need to scale your advertising. That's when your app is also going to grow. There's a kind of like a simple 3-step thing that we recommend to a lot of our indie developers, which is first, you have to understand if you have a good game, which is, are you able to retain your users? And then you want to test out all the different kinds of ad formats there is. You have to understand what balance you want between your monetizing and your retention, user retention. And then you start to scale your UA, so you'll have a good balance, or you'll know exactly what you want to do and when. Like if you take rewarded ads, for instance, right, just like going off of what Oscar and Christian were talking about, it's actually an opportunity also for a lot of users because they actually are able to get some content that they would otherwise need to pay for. So that would be a great way for users to actually use your app's content.
I think the rewarded side of it is, when you're coming back to this real kind of value and win-win and making everybody happy about that game experience. And maybe back to you, Christian, about this sort of disruption side of things. The argument of, that we're going down a line of everybody's very anti-disruption. We have the solutions of like Adinmo with their sort of the brand advertising, or we have Audio Mob with the rewarded audio to counter all the disruption. But is there an argument for some disruption?
Again, just to add on to that, I think that certainly when we'd evolved from the traditional disruptive ads where a banner would be in a game, and as you progress throughout that game the banner would be displayed, but yet the button that you need to press is underneath the banner and it's a false click on the banner. You leave the game and go to the app store. I mean, that's a disastrous experience, and it really did need to evolve. But then as the evolution comes through, between the levels, you can have a display advertiser, a full screen interstitial. You can skip some of these, not rewarded, you can skip some of these video formats. And then, of course, the evolution there where you could actually, in order to claim your reward or indeed double your reward, and this is where the creative juices start flowing with the game developers, and they start getting excited as to, not having a disruption within the game, but how can we bring that player in? And in order to, several game developers, I'll mention one in particular. I think that the format is fantastic, and that's BoomBit. BoomBit have really accelerated in the way that they present their reward solution, and actually it give that opportunity to the game developer with the user to either double the reward or indeed I've seen several different formats available, in one in particular with Farmville, where you've planted your garden, and then there's a cloud that sort of comes across and says, would you like your crops to grow 3x by clicking here? There's a lot of different creativity. And I really think that certainly you mentioned several other formats there that are non-disruptive, and these are non-clickable, that can actually be immersed within the actual gameplay. And I think we're going to see an awful lot more of that. And also I think that when you look at the hyper casual titles that many say that are all totally ad funded. I mean, I don't agree completely with that, because there are a lot of in-app purchase opportunities that can be optimized as well for that. But certainly I think that when we saw the hyper casual titles, that actually we're going to expect ads in the game, and for that reason, in order to continue with that, they've really sort of got it really tightly knit in that game to allow a expected obtrusion, but to continue play with that in order to get that reward to continue. So really, sort of like getting that user to allow them to either respawn or have a second opportunity at getting over the hurdle that they have, or indeed, becoming a slightly bigger engine in the car. So, and that all leads to that in-app purchase. So I think it's a stepping stone to effectively generate as much money as possible without being disruptive.
I think, I mean, I see many of the games that I play actually as work living art sometimes. They are just so clever and so creative. Even well, particularly sometimes the hyper casual games in their simplicity. But there's coming back to
what Christian.
Sorry?
Could I expand something that Christian said? I think is very cool. And I really think that's something that many developers don't understand. And Christian really said it really well. Is also on the developer side. I mean, the ad companies, they provide new ways to produce ad, like, of course, the banner, the video, the audio, and who knows what is coming on. But also is on the design of the ad itself, and that's something that the developer needs to think. For example, something really cool that I saw only once was an ad that allow you to choose what type of ad and how long you wanted to see in exchange of a different type of reward, or not having an ad later. So it was like, if you have free time, maybe watch a super long ad and then don't be interrupted later. Or maybe just super short because you are in the game, but give you a shorter reward. And that's not on the ad side. That's on the design experience on the ad. And that's something that I think many developers underestimate. They just go with the dominant design, let's just stop, let's just give some in-game currency and done. And that's, sure, it works. I mean, it's dominant design, so it does work. But it's a very limited thing. We need really
I want to go a bit further on that if I can. I think the bottom line is that people need to think about ads as part of the user journey. There's a reason why ads work so well in hyper-casual games. It's because of the rhythm of play, in my opinion. What that means is that we have an intensity of experience, and we need time to rest, to have relief. So if you have that kind of play, stop, watch an ad whilst I'm relaxing, that intensity is now diminished. I've got this kind of experience going on. I may or may not be that interested in the particular of the ad, but the ad is providing me with a space which has value to the player experience. And actually, value to the player experience is absolutely what goes through all of this. And one of the things that we found, particularly in the early days when we were looking at rewarded ads early on, is that we weren't seeing a direct correlation between a rewarded ad and people buying. And the reason was generally because they weren't implementing, they weren't telling a story, essentially, by the experience about why this kind of value reward meant that I could now see why I'd want to buy the thing. Some of the best examples we saw back in the day was, my favorite one is my mate Mark Ettle's game, Let's Go Rocket. It's an old game, it probably can't be found anymore, but I love it because basically every few plays, it would show me an ad and I would get a free skin for 3 goes. At the end of those 3 goes of using that skin, I would then get offered to buy that piece at half price. There was a direct correlation between seeing the value, seeing that thing taken away from me. If I don't want it, that's fine. If I don't want it, but if I did want it, I could already understand why I should care. And I know I'm not going to get that offer again, so why wouldn't I? So this idea of really thinking about where players care, what the value is really critical to this. And basically, by looking at ads as part of an exchange mechanism, so you're allowing players to unlock value and to understand, to be communicated why the elements of gameplay are interesting and valuable to them, and to give them that break, that freedom that comes in, the flow of the experience. If you do that authentically, you'll be rewarded because you'll get more players who see the value because you focused on what's valuable to them. Goes the other way with the promotion as well. If you communicate solid messages that allow people to understand what's going on with your game, why your game is appealing, what's going on, why they should care, then that will contribute to your UA success. That's why tapping your creatives into the reality of the authenticity of the game can be hugely effective. It doesn't mean you can't think about, you got to think about like targeting, segmentation and placement and spend. That's obviously there too, but you can help that process inspire your creative by tapping into the value for players.
I think you touched on a very interesting subject, well, and actually related to another topic that Diego mentioned before, that ads should be designed from the beginning. I mean, ads obviously impact the customer journey, right? The player journey, and they will have an impact on lifetime values. And if you think about it, ads can impact marketing if they are not included in the monetization plan. So we actually have something that I can really share, a personal experience, that Bytro is experiencing this right now. So we implemented ads very recently, not from the beginning. And you have to approach the marketing differently because you now have a completely different monetization plan, and you'll have to address these users differently. But also, you have to take into account that your monetization model has changed. So the users will monetize differently. So their lifetime values will be different. So when you're accounting for your UA and you're expecting a certain value, this will not work the same way because the customer journey was completely altered by the monetization. This can either go better, as Oscar mentioned. If it's designed correctly, it can even increase the in-app purchase. But if it's not developed well, it might affect your lifetime values negatively because you get way too many rewards, or the users are not happy with the experience, or they can even find some exploits and not pay at all. So this is also something that we have to take into account when implementing ads. So it can be disruptive or an opportunity at the same time.
A similar pet hate of mine, which is related exactly to what you're saying, is when you sell people the ability to turn off ads. What you're doing is you're basically saying you don't want the people who will get the most value out of ads to get value out of ads. To me, that's like giving up. Rather, get a better experience.
So I have a different perspective on how ads can contribute before your game. Early on with hyper-casuals, we have a lot of hyper-casual customers. The one thing that we saw is that some companies were actually using ads. Like you develop the creatives first, and then depending, like 50 plus creatives. So depending on which one was actually successful, then you start building the game and then like expanding the game based on that. That is generally like that itself is actually contributing to your successful game at that point.
And are you seeing a lot more different types of creatives being used and applied, Pooja?
It's kind of like changing now with given all the iOS 14, rules that have come out. Like for instance, it's very hard to do performance-based ads at this point. So we're seeing more people like switching to brand ads. But there's also a thing with brand ads that only big companies can actually use that. So there's not really much we can do right now until like we figure out a way, or like developers figure out a way to, use the performance-based ads in the new normal situation. It's going to be brand ads in the short and medium term for like, I don't know how long, until someone figures out what to do. Yeah.
Is that all about the measurement debate with the brand ads? How obviously with performance marketing, we've got oodles of data that we can work with, but the brand advertising measurement isn't quite correlating it. But I understand it's coming soon.
We are actually working on something. It's called attribution modeling, where we're developing like an App Store compliant way where advertisers are able to measure their advertising performance using LTV and our ROAS, which is actually not available now with the iOS 14.
Excellent. And just in terms of coming back to this sort of different applications of creatives and everything else, are we all seeing more unique kind of ways of building that into the design, the first game design documents, and are developers now starting to get a little bit more, going a bit more out there, so to speak, in terms of bringing the advertising into the game? Everyone's nodding.
Yeah, I think it's.
Yeah.
I mean, we're starting it. It's a long journey, and definitely you need to have the courage, I think, to do that. Of course, that's something that you were saying before. You need to testing. When you're trying a new idea, you're testing it, and maybe actually everyone hates it, so it wasn't that great idea, or maybe it wasn't that great idea for that specific game that you are making. And of course, the risk of failure is something that make everyone scary. I think especially true in ads, since it's probably your monetization model. So it's your revenue, and if you fail the revenue, you're gonna fail because you're not gonna get money. But I think that slowly, people it's starting to try new things, especially because the one that works, they are very consolidated now. So if you really want to, let's say, just try the standard, you can just do a research and probably copy it very quickly, no effort. They allow you to give a bit of room to experimenting. Now, not every company has the time, resources, or people that know how to do proper A/B testing or things like that. Now, that's always a risk.
I'd like to challenge you. I don't think you should do it first. A reason I say this is because I don't want to waste money making games that don't work. So we have a very KPI-driven model, which we recommend to the partners we work with and people support. Essentially, it comes down to, I need to know before you build a game that it's going to be valuable. So we've taken that leaf out of the hyper-casual model, where we don't build the game to start with, we build a 30-second video ad. That's all we're building. And we only build anything more on the game when we know there's an audience for that game.
Yeah, fine. I agree on that.
And then we do a first playable, and we use that first playable to get to do a test using something like Playtest Cloud or Antidote. And I want a net promoter score. I'm not going to carry on building the game until I know that I've got a positive net promoter score that makes it worthwhile. And by building up in layers like this, it makes it much easier to know that you've got a game that's going to go to beta and have higher retention. And only when I've got high enough retention am I going to start implementing my monetization. Now, this is where I'm choosing. I design games, or I encourage people to design games in layers. So I look for the mechanic, so the thing that you do, the context, the sense of purpose and progression, and the metagame. What I mean by metagame is a real metagame, i.e. the things that's not the game. So that's the social engagement, the cultural elements, the kind of mode of use of the device, lifestyle fit, that kind of stuff. The reason I do it like that is because if I have a repeatable mechanic that's extensible and that drives forward a sense of purpose and progression, I already know how I'm going to implement ad mechanisms into that. I already know where the value proposition is, so I can identify what the in-app purchases can be. I don't have to worry about whether the design is going to work with this, because I've already sliced it in a repeatable formula that can work, which doesn't compromise the player experience. And that's, to me, the key. It's not doing ads first. It's having the mindset of making games that will be able to accommodate the right business model for the player that's as flexible as possible, but you focus on basically making the gameplay work first.
Well, I do agree on that, but I think that the key difference is just the fact that your progression in the game, especially in the creation and design, is always flexible. I think something that you said is you need to do the mechanics, and that's something that as a designer, I totally agree. Like, when I design something by experience, by knowledge, by many things, I think is going to work. But many times I discovered that people hated it. One of the experience mine was I was very sure the mechanic that I did in Ghost Recon Wildlands was fantastic. Then we did testing, and like people say, no, it's the worst thing I ever tried.
We've all done that, yeah.
Let's don't do that anymore. So I always think that you need to be flexible. you need to be flexible because, of course, otherwise you're gonna waste that mechanic. So you're rebuilding it, you're redoing it, and doing it in layers makes sense. But I think that the ad layer needs to be at least thinked, because you need to at least know what type of business model are you trying to achieve. How much are you on ad? How much are you on in-app purchase? How much are you on cross-referencing if you have other games? I mean, that's depend on the company. Maybe you don't have them. I mean, how much of your ecosystem it's interconnected? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's hyper casual, so very strict. Maybe it's like, no, I want to have a meta currency that's linked between all my games and that is referenced.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's really, and that's something that I think you said, it's serving both the player, and that's why you need to be flexible, but also it needs to serve the business.
Yes, absolutely.
And therefore, you need to know what type of business are you trying to get, which is very
We're just arguing the different sides of the same coin, I suspect.
I'm going to throw something in there just to kind of break that out for you guys. I mean, there's an awful lot about the end user, which is obviously the most important person on this. But I spent an incredible amount of time with the technical guys that are responsible for what is the elephant in the room, this SDK, because without that SDK, it's not going to happen. And you look at depending on how big the resources are within those technical teams, and that's a big barrier to entry. But now that there's an awful lot of mergers and acquisitions out there, that platforms actually allow one SDK to populate across each of those ad formats, and that's the kind of the retail environment where, you know, it's like going to Argos or going to the hypermarket, where, you know, you don't have to go to each individual developer of that particular format. You can go to one unit and test it out, and there are several competitors that can provide alternatives of the same. And it's all about making it as easy as possible, in my eyes, for you guys to concentrate on all of those discussion points that you've got there. You know, let's just create the games and get it out there.
The one thing that I would add is cross promotion would be a great way for you to test this out. And like to address like any concerns around you know, costs, or like, is this actually going to fit into my model? This is actually a cheap way to figure out, is this going to work or not?
Well, we didn't really talk a lot about cross promotion, but I think it's, you know, it's a really key thing for people to be considering. I think certainly we've discussed Ubisoft Coin, for example, and you know how successful that's been. I'm interested to know, is that, Christian, I'm just going to sort of zero in on what you said, just create the games and get them out there. But it isn't that easy, really, is it?
Oh, just ask Diego, ask Dave, it's no problem. The tools there. Oscar, you know, he's got, we speak to game developers and they've got so much creativity, and for you know, a platform like Pocket Gamer, there's so many resources that make it easy. Yeah, it is, and it's only got easier with the more players and the breakdown. You know, back in the Java days, from myself and Oscar, an absolute nightmare, and developers needed, you know, hundreds of thousands of hours. And you know, you couldn't release a game on the operator portal unless you supported 80% of the handsets. When we were over there,
and made me happy. You had to make me happy.
And most importantly, make you happy. Now there's two platforms. Well, maybe, you know, a couple of others out there. But yeah, the main two. It's a developer's dream, and I'm really excited to see so much of the youth and the fact that the government has got behind us all the way around the world to allow universities, for students to come, you know, from playing these games to actually create games. And it really is a hell of a lot easier than it was 2 decades ago.
Back in the good old days when operators were king.
But it's interesting to hear your enthusiasm, and I share it completely. Where do you see things going? Do you think things are going to become more simple in terms of particularly when it comes to the smorgasbord of different ad opportunities that are available to developers. How do you see that maybe sort of simplifying in terms of them bringing these to market?
Well, I've actually watched a few of the webinars, and there's a nice new taxonomy that's always kind of coming out. And this is a metaverse. Some of the platforms out there, you know, I think that on a previous call we alluded to sharing some ideas about where particular ads or brand placements can be, avatars where, you know, you can buy a Nike hat, for example, or you know, if you're in a sports game and you're training, you can earn a pair of Nike sneakers or swap them out for Adidas. You're in a racing car game, it's unbranded, but yet, you know, I really like a particular, you know, German manufacturer, and I'd like my German manufacturer badge on the car. So much more, rather than, you know, here's a banner ad, please click here, developer makes X amount of money. Everything's evolving, and this is the great thing about it. It's not restrictive, and just as Diego was saying there, that, you know, developers don't have a closed mind anymore, and their mind is open. And I think that the youth now, with all of the social sharing and everything that's going on, that there's so much more creativity and opportunities for particular advertising within the game that is non-obtrusive, and perhaps we wouldn't know about it. It's there, but we haven't seen it. We have seen it, but we didn't actually have to click on something to get at that. So yeah, I really do think that we're going to see an awful lot more and simplified opportunities to integrate within the games.
And I think you mentioned opportunity, didn't you? And it is actually, from what I'm hearing and seeing, particularly through today's panels and webinars, are the fact that advertising is sort of moved and morphed from being this sort of necessity into more of a sort of creative opportunity on so many different levels. So David, you were talking about the fact that your user base has changed from, you know, working with TikTok. You know, you're looking at a younger base, and so you're having to, you know, to change your strategies accordingly.
Yeah, so I actually had a very interesting point. I mean, games grew a lot last year, right? During the pandemic, they were already big. They were already bigger than music and films and books,
movies, yeah,
all combined, right? And gaming was already bigger than those, but it went mainstream last year. Everyone is stuck at home. Everyone had nothing else to do, so it went mainstream, right? And I think everyone wants a piece of the pie. So they realized that there's this huge audience that has been almost untouched until now, and now everyone wants a little bit, and they are all trying to get something out of it. So if they're not going with banner ads or interstitials or rewarded ads, they'll make their way into the games in another way. So Christian was mentioning, hey, you can buy this in game from Nike or from Adidas. I actually have a very interesting example. MasterCard was in League of Legends, for example. They were advertising like a normal tournament, like we saw during the Euro that TikTok was everywhere. So MasterCard was just in a tournament in game in League of Legends. It was a banner inside of the game. So I think all of these companies want a piece of the pie, and they will do whatever it takes to be there. And this will result in way more creative approaches to marketing and a lot more competition as well.
Yeah, I think we're only at the early dawn of that. We've been seeing lots of experiments. I remember when I put the first fully ad-funded product on a Java device, which was actually a movie trailer service for free back in the day. And
which day was that?
Oh, I could 20. No, could probably pull it out for you if you really wanted. So we basically were getting people to pay 50p per view of a trailer. and it went free because the guys at a directory service called 118.118 decided to use their ad funding to do that. We had a 35-fold increase in usage as a direct result. It's an enormous increase in usage. We made tons of money. There was a 7% increase in total call volume to that platform, which is an enormous number. Now, you'd think that would be an obvious thing to go off and do again, but they didn't. The reason is because at that time it was out of their R&D budget. The only time they would repeat something like that was because it would come out of a mainstream budget. So whilst we have seen a lot of brand spending, we haven't really seen the systemic mainstream use of ad spending in the way that they were suggesting. However much I think it's coming, I just think we're only seeing the first signs of it. When that comes, when we start seeing the things that the guys at Ad and various other companies have been talking about for ages, I remember Unity talking about doing this a long time ago. But once brands really lock into the fact that games have the biggest reach on the planet, then we will start seeing a transformation. But it's a push me, pull you one. As much as I would love to see the simplification that Christian's talking about, I honestly love you, mate, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's really going to get more complicated, not less. There are lots of people out there who are fighting for this budget that's going to be coming in, and it already is there. But there's a lot of studios who find the whole thing already very daunting. A lot of people who find the whole free-to-play model very daunting. The idea of using ads is a daunting thing for a lot of people. The job we've got to do is try and help them find the flow, to find the opportunity, and also to get them to think about this in joined up ways. So how do you make sure that the experience of the player is joined up? How do you make sure that the ads, the promotions, the social media, all these pieces are all joined up? And the more we think about the synergies, that's where the simplification will come, and that's where it will get a little bit easier. But we're always going to have challenges and opportunities.
Just to add on to that, Oscar, and I think that you're absolutely right. It's great that you've shared that memory. This is probably one of the only industries that we've actually been there, done it, delivered it, seen it, and as it's evolving, it's going to come straight back round again. And it's going to happen. It really will.
I'm going to join the experience.
It's like disco's coming back. Oh, maybe not.
I'm going to join the experience. This is fun. No, it's great, Jacki. Great panel. I have tons of questions. I'll take one or two, but we're already over. But hey, when you're having fun, why not? I'll take a couple here. Okay, let's do this one. It was touched upon in David's chat, but with age in gaming, do you think ads and marketing have managed to keep up with audiences and players? And you mentioned, Christian, it's gone mainstream. This is the real deal. Maybe that is a gap.
It is, but again, you look at how ads are populated within the game through the different platforms. They've got the white list, the black lists, all of the age consents. I haven't seen it. I don't actually play any over 18 games. I know that my children are over 18, but they do play. But I was listening to several of and I've heard it many, many times, where and we're talking about in particular brand advertising here, and the association or the disassociation of various types of genres that would never allow a brand to be in that particular game. And I've done a lot of thinking about this. You're watching the TV. There's now a watershed on products that are not allowed to be advertised during a set time. I'm talking about FMCGs, or even McDonald's are not allowed to advertise now until 6 p.m. Are we going to see that in games if a game's been played after a certain time, or are there going to be new restrictions or requirements? But again, the more sophisticated we get, or indeed if they start to loosen the reins on that really protective side, I do think that it could happen, yes.
We've been doing some work recently with the ICO, and there's a whole bunch of regulations about the children's code that's coming up. Hopefully in the next couple of months, we should be able to share some of the findings that we've had about best practice to try and help protect people, the game developers, to to do the right thing. We'll see how that comes out, but we are not lacking in challenges coming.
Tons more material. I don't know, Jackie. I think I have to. I mean, there is one question. Maybe we could do rapid fire, right? Rapid fire means quick answers, okay? Because we have someone here, because you've made everyone really excited about advertising. And now they're saying, okay, if you could give us developers, us studios, looking at advertising, one top tip to make a choice, what would it be? So this might be a choice on the monetization method. It might be about format. I'll leave that open. This person wants one top tip. Shall we take it across, Jackie? Lead it through your panel, starting with you.
For me,
yeah, you too.
My top tip would be to come to things like this, to participate in Pocket Gamer, to read pg.biz, to read and talk to all the experts on a one-to-one basis as well. You know, do research, speak to people, learn. That's my top tip.
Cool. I'll take it. David, what's yours?
My tip is, especially for running games, A/B test it before you roll it out completely, because it can negatively affect your marketing and then you cannot go back. Or it will be very hard to go back once you give that option to the users.
Okay, testing. Pooja, what is yours?
Same as David, you have to test out before you actually do something major with your apps.
Yeah, testing. And we heard the story from you, Oscar, you know, test with just the concept of a game.
I'm going to chuck in a bit early. Test before you launch. Yes. Make sure that you actually get your game ready so that you can be successful. Too many publishers get involved too late. You've got to be responsible for making sure your game is ready.
And that you can monetize it. It's part of the gameplay. Yeah. Christian, what about you?
Come to Pocket Gamer, all the resources are here. But listen to your customers. They're the guys that ultimately are going to be paying your bills. Listen to the customers.
Okay. Diego, are you with us?
Yeah, mine is play and study ARG, alternative reality games, which are basically ads, but you play them and you are happy to be exposed to advertising by playing it. So mine is study how to make your advertisement interactive, because we're in an interactive.
Very cool. Is that what your book is about?
No, mine is about game design in general.
Okay.
So far
I'm gonna look you up. I'm gonna keep that in mind. I hate to let you go, Jackie. Thank your panel. We could go here all night, open up a beer and stay, but you gotta go.
Thank you, everybody, for all the time that you put into these. It's great.
Absolutely.
Thanks all. Lovely seeing you all.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful
Thank you, everyone.